The weekend had been a blur of laughter, warm hugs, and shared meals, a rare moment where the chaos of life seemed to pause. Alyssa returned to her small apartment in Seattle late Sunday night, exhausted but content. The familiar scent of her favorite lavender candle filled the air as she kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch. For once, everything felt right. Family gatherings were always a mixed bag, equal parts joy and obligation, but this time, there was no lingering tension, no unspoken grievances hanging over them like storm clouds. She allowed herself a small smile before reaching for her phone to check her banking app. The electric bill was due tomorrow, and she wanted to get it out of the way. Her fingers froze on the screen. The number staring back at her wasn't just wrong, it was incomprehensible. $83.52. Her heart skipped a beat. 3 days ago, she'd checked her account after payday, and it had been healthy, robust even, over $9,000. Panic clawed at her chest as she refreshed the app, hoping against hope that it was some cruel glitch. But no. The balance remained stubbornly, horrifyingly low. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead. She scrolled through the transaction history, each line a dagger slicing deeper into her composure. Withdrawals. Transfers. Hundreds here, thousands there, all within the past 48 hours. Her hands trembled as she dialed the bank's customer service line, her mind racing with possibilities. Had she been hacked? Was someone impersonating her online? The representative's voice was calm but distant as he confirmed the worst. All transactions were made from a device previously logged into your account, ma'am. Same IP address as a personal computer. It hit her like a freight train. That IP address belonged to her mother's house, the very place she'd just left hours earlier. Memories of the cozy kitchen, the sound of her niece Haley giggling during hide-and-seek, flooded her mind. How could this happen? Who would do this? Without thinking, Alyssa grabbed her keys and stormed out into the rain-soaked night. The drive to her mom's house felt endless, every red light stretching eternity. Each drop of rain hitting the windshield mirrored the turmoil brewing inside her. How could they? Why would they? Questions swirled in her head, none with answers that made sense. When she stepped through the front door, the warmth of nostalgia nearly suffocated her. The faint smell of roasted chicken still lingered in the air, mingling with the soft hum of the television in the living room. It should have felt comforting, but instead, it felt mocking, like the house itself was laughing at her naivety. "You're back already?" Amanda's voice floated in from the couch, casual and carefree, as if nothing was amiss. She sat cross-legged, sipping red wine, her expression unreadable. "I just checked my bank account," Alyssa said, her voice tight, trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. Nathan emerged from the kitchen, soda can in hand, leaning casually against the fridge. He smirked when he saw her face. "Oh, that. We needed the money more than you did, Alyssa." The words landed like a slap. Alyssa's vision blurred with rage and disbelief. "You, what?" Amanda shrugged, unaffected. "Don't be so dramatic. You've got a good job, no debt, no kids. You live alone. What do you even need all that money for?" Her mother's knitting needles clicked softly in the corner, her gaze fixed on her work. "Alyssa, sweetheart, you're always so sensitive. Helping a little isn't the end of the world." "Helping?" Alyssa's voice cracked under the weight of betrayal. "You didn't ask. You just took it." Her father barely glanced up from his phone, mumbling something about family business and harsh words. Alyssa stared at them, searching for any sign of guilt, any flicker of remorse. There was none. Just blank faces, shrugging shoulders, and excuses wrapped in platitudes. She turned away, choking back tears, her fists clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. Outside, the rain continued to pour, echoing the storm raging inside her. As she walked out the door, she whispered loud enough for them to hear, "If you think I'm letting this go, wait and see what happens next." Driving through the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, Alyssa's mind spiraled backward, retracing years of sacrifices she had made for her family. Each memory felt like a shard of glass piercing deeper into her already fragile heart. It wasn't just about the stolen money anymore, it was about everything that had led to this moment. She remembered the first time Amanda called her after she landed the marketing manager job at a major pharmaceutical company. At 27, it was her first big break, and she was determined to prove herself. But within weeks, Amanda's voice cut through her excitement. "Hey, my phone got cut off. Can you spot me some cash?" Alyssa didn't think twice. They were family, right? She transferred $150 without hesitation. Then came Nathan. Unemployed for nearly 6 months, he called one evening, his tone casual but tinged with desperation. "I just need a few $100 to get by until I find something," he said. Alyssa hesitated only briefly before wiring the money. After all, wasn't that what families did? Support each other in times of need? But the requests never stopped. A year later, when Haley turned 5, Amanda sent over a birthday gift list. The cheapest item on it was over $200. Alyssa wanted to say no, but then her mom called, her voice sweet yet firm. "You're not getting anything for your niece? She's so excited. You're better off than the rest of us." Guilt settled heavily on Alyssa's chest, and she bought the most expensive toy on the list, a remote-controlled car that cost her nearly half her paycheck that month. And so it began. Every financial hiccup in the family became hers to solve. Amanda needed help with a down payment for a new car, Alyssa chipped in. Nathan lost his wallet, she wired him emergency funds that same night. Her mom's electric bill was overdue, Alyssa dipped into her savings. Each time, they assured her it would be temporary. "We'll pay you back soon," they promised. But those words started to ring hollow after the third, fourth, fifth time they went unfulfilled. The worst part wasn't the money, it was the lack of acknowledgement. No one ever asked if she was okay. No one noticed when she skipped vacations or put off buying things for herself. 3 months ago, she turned down a weekend getaway with her best friend because she used that money to help Nathan avoid eviction. Instead of gratitude, they treated her contributions as obligations. "You're the most stable one in the family," they said, as if that justified taking advantage of her. Now, as the windshield wipers swished rhythmically against the rain, Alyssa replayed every instance where she had given up something important for them. Last Christmas, she worked overtime to afford gifts for everyone, even though she barely had time to decorate her own apartment. When Amanda complained about not having enough money for Haley's school supplies, Alyssa sent her an extra $300, eating instant noodles for 3 weeks to make ends meet. She thought about the vacations she never took, the trips to Paris, the beach retreats with friends, the hiking adventures she dreamed of. All sacrificed because someone in her family always seemed to have a crisis looming. Yet not once did anyone ask how she managed. Not once did they consider that maybe she too had dreams, desires, and limits. As she pulled into a quiet parking lot near Green Lake Park, Alyssa's hands tightened around the steering wheel. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and pale sunlight peeked through the gray clouds, casting faint shadows on the wet asphalt. She stared out the window, her breath fogging up the glass. For years, she believed she was doing the right thing, that her sacrifices brought value to her family. But now, sitting alone in her car, she realized the truth: they didn't see her as a person. To them, she was simply a walking ATM card, a solution to their problems, a resource to exploit whenever convenient. Her phone buzzed again, a text from her mom. "Amanda said you're upset about the money. Don't make a big deal, sweetheart. We're family." Family. That word used to mean love, trust, and support. Now, it felt heavy, suffocating. Alyssa clenched her jaw, anger bubbling beneath the surface. She opened her laptop and logged into her banking app, scrolling through years of transactions. Each line told a story: a missed vacation, a skipped meal, a delayed personal goal, all for the sake of keeping her family afloat. She opened a notes document and began typing furiously, cataloging every single payment she had ever made: $92.50, Amanda's phone bill, 3 years ago. $450, Nathan's urgent emergency fund. $3,200, rent assistance for Nathan last winter. $1,350, a gaming console Nathan bought during Black Friday, money she had to skip a coworker trip to afford her insurance payment. Every entry stung, a reminder of how much she had given, and how little she had received in return. Tears welled up in her eyes as she wrote, her fingers trembling with a mix of rage and sadness. Outside, the rain had completely stopped, leaving behind a damp stillness. Alyssa leaned back in her seat, staring at the screen. She had always hoped that someday her family would notice, that they would say thank you or at least ask how she was doing. But they never did. Because in their eyes, she didn't need help. And the one who didn't need help was expected to help everyone else. Her thoughts turned darker. What had she done wrong? Why had she let this happen? Was it guilt? Fear of being labeled selfish? Or was it simply the belief that loving someone meant sacrificing everything for them? The realization hit her like a punch to the gut: she had enabled their selfishness. By giving endlessly without question, she had taught them to expect it. And now, they saw her refusal to comply as betrayal rather than self-preservation. Alyssa wiped her tears and straightened in her seat. Enough was enough. She opened a new tab on her laptop and began researching unauthorized access laws. Then, she pulled out a folder filled with receipts, emails, and screenshots she had saved over the years, not because she was paranoid, but because deep down, she knew someday her quiet sacrifices would need proof. As she organized the documents, a strange sense of calm washed over her. This wasn't just about reclaiming her money, it was about reclaiming her dignity, her identity. For too long, she had allowed others to define her worth based on what she could give. Now, she was ready to redefine it, for herself. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the park. Alyssa took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of resolve ignite within her. She closed her laptop, gripped the steering wheel, and drove home. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt in control of her own life. The next morning, Alyssa woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She brewed a cup of coffee, her hands steady despite the storm brewing inside her. On the kitchen counter lay the printed bank statements, 17 pages of transactions meticulously marked in red ink. Each highlighted line was a piece of evidence, a shard of proof that someone in her family had deliberately accessed her account. One transaction stood out like a scarlet letter, a withdrawal of nearly $2,800 from an IP address matching her mom's house. It wasn't just carelessness, it was calculated. She opened her laptop and drafted an email to the Financial Crimes Division, attaching the spreadsheet she had spent 3 sleepless nights compiling. Green for medical expenses, yellow for rent, red for unjustified withdrawals like Nathan's gaming console purchase. Every category told a story of betrayal. By noon, she had submitted her complaint form online and made an appointment to visit their office the following day. Driving back to her mother's house felt surreal, like stepping into a battlefield where the war had already begun. The air smelled of roasted chicken, just as it always did on Sundays, but today it felt suffocating. Alyssa walked in without knocking, clutching the folder of documents tight against her chest. Amanda sat at the dining table scrolling through her phone, while Nathan leaned back on the couch flipping channels aimlessly. Her parents were nowhere to be seen, but the tension hung heavy in the room. "I need answers," Alyssa said, slamming the folder onto the table. The sound echoed through the silence like a gunshot. Amanda glanced up, startled, then rolled her eyes. "What's this now?" "This," Alyssa snapped, opening the folder and spreading the papers across the table, "is every unauthorized transaction made from my account. Someone accessed it using Mom's computer. Care to explain who?" Nathan finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You're being dramatic again." "Dramatic?" Alyssa's voice rose, trembling with anger. "Helping is when someone asks and gets permission. This isn't helping, it's theft." Her mother appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Alyssa, sweetheart, what's all this fuss about?" "What's this fuss about?" Alyssa repeated, incredulous. "Mom, someone drained almost $9,000 from my account. And before you say anything, yes, I have proof." Her father shuffled into the room, glasses perched on his nose, holding yesterday's newspaper. "These things happen in families, Alyssa. No need to involve outsiders." "No need." Alyssa turned to him, her voice icy. "So you think it's okay to take money without asking? To use my personal information without consent? Would you feel the same if it happened to you?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock. Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. Nathan crossed his arms, smirking faintly, as if daring her to continue. "I trusted you," Alyssa said, her voice breaking slightly. "I gave when you asked because we're family. But this? This isn't family. This is exploitation." Amanda finally spoke, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Oh, please. You left your account logged in. It's not like we hacked into Fort Knox. That doesn't justify it." Alyssa shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "You didn't ask. You didn't even consider how it would affect me." Her mother sighed, shaking her head. "You're always so sensitive, Alyssa. We needed the money. What were we supposed to do?" "You could have asked," Alyssa whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "But you didn't. Because deep down, you knew I'd say no." Her father folded his newspaper with deliberate slowness. "Don't be so harsh. You've always been the strong one, the one everyone relies on. That's just how it is." Alyssa stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. "And what happens when I'm not strong enough anymore? When I can't keep giving? Do you even care?" No one answered. The silence stretched taut like a wire ready to snap. Alyssa gathered the papers and stuffed them back into the folder. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edges. "If you think I'm going to let this go," she said, her voice low but firm, "you're wrong. Wait and see what happens next." She turned and walked out, leaving behind a room filled with stunned faces. The drive home was a blur of anger and resolve. She replayed the conversation in her mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. They didn't understand, or worse, they didn't want to. 2 weeks later, the consequences began to unfold. It started with a text from Amanda, "My bank account is frozen. I can't pay Haley's tuition. Are you happy now?" Then came Nathan's panicked email, "They're investigating my accounts. I could lose everything over this. Can't you say something to help?" That evening, Alyssa received a call from Officer Harper. "We've confirmed multiple unauthorized transactions. Your sister Amanda is under formal investigation for financial fraud. Nathan is implicated in withdrawing funds from an unapproved device. And your parents used part of the money for illegal mortgage payments, which may lead to foreclosure proceedings. Alyssa listened in silence, her heart pounding. Part of her felt vindicated, they finally understood the gravity of their actions, but another part ached with sadness. How had it come to this? Late that night, her phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from her mom, texts from Nathan, voicemails begging her to intervene. She ignored them all. Standing by her window, she watched the city lights flicker in the distance. For years, she had carried the weight of their expectations, their problems, their failures. Now, she was letting it go, not out of hatred, but out of self-preservation. By morning, the news had spread. A neighbor texted her, "There are people in jackets labeled Financial Crimes Unit outside Donna's house. They asked about you too." Alyssa set her phone down and took a deep breath. The storm she had unleashed was real, and there was no turning back. But as she sipped her coffee, a strange calm settled over her. She wasn't the old Alyssa anymore, the one who stayed silent, who sacrificed everything for others. She was someone new. Someone stronger. 3 weeks after filing the financial complaint, Alyssa stood in her Seattle apartment for the last time. The morning air was heavy with gray clouds, mirroring the storm that had raged inside her for so long. She zipped up the last suitcase, glanced around the empty room, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just a move, it was an escape, a rebirth. Boulder, Colorado, awaited her, a place she barely remembered but felt inexplicably drawn to. That cozy cafe with its soft jazz music and warm yellow lights had left an imprint on her soul years ago, and now it called her back like a beacon of hope. The drive across the state was long, quiet, and reflective. As the miles stretched behind her, Alyssa felt the weight of her old life slipping away. Every exit sign marked not just distance but freedom, a chance to shed the skin of a woman who had been smothered by unreasonable expectations. When she finally arrived in Boulder, the crisp mountain air greeted her like a welcome embrace. For the first time in years, she felt untethered, unburdened by the endless calls, the guilt trips, the relentless demands. She rented a small studio apartment overlooking the mountains, its white walls and large windows catching the morning light. It was modest but perfect, her sanctuary. Over the next few days, Alyssa unpacked carefully, arranging every detail to reflect the person she wanted to become. She bought fresh flowers, hung abstract paintings, and filled the space with soft textures and warm colors. This wasn't just decorating, it was reclaiming herself, piece by piece. One of the first things she did was change her phone number. She didn't announce it to anyone, not her coworkers, not even her closest friends from Seattle. It was a clean break, a deliberate step toward independence. Her old number had been a lifeline for her family, a direct line to her bank account, her energy, her patience. Now, it was gone, along with the version of herself that had let them drain her dry. At work, Alyssa threw herself into her projects with renewed focus. Without the constant distractions of family crises, her mind felt clearer than ever. One afternoon, Julian, her boss, called her into his office. His expression was serious, but there was a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "Alyssa," he began, leaning forward, "I've reviewed your new strategy plan, and I have to say, it's brilliant. Have you considered taking over as regional coordinator for the entire West Coast?" Alyssa froze. A year ago, she would have hesitated, weighed the responsibilities against the sacrifices she'd have to make for her family. But now, sitting in this chair, looking out at the sunlight sparkling through the pine trees, she realized something profound: she didn't owe anyone anything anymore. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice steady. Julian chuckled, clearly pleased. "I knew you'd be the first person to come to mind. Congratulations, Alyssa." As she walked back to her desk, Alyssa felt a surge of pride, not the kind that came from proving herself to others, but the kind that came from knowing she had fought for herself. This was more than a promotion, it was validation that she could thrive without being tethered to the chaos of her past. Her new life in Boulder wasn't just about work. Slowly, Alyssa began building connections with people who truly cared about her. At yoga classes, she met Sarah, a graphic designer with a quick laugh and a knack for storytelling. Over coffee, they talked about everything except money, how Sarah's cat had knocked over her favorite plant, how Alyssa was learning to cook risotto. For the first time, conversations weren't transactional. They were real. Even her coworkers noticed the change. Gone was the woman who stayed late to answer frantic emails from Nathan or Amanda. In her place was someone confident, grounded, and present. One Friday evening, after a team dinner, Julian raised his glass. "To Alyssa," he said, smiling. "For showing us what it means to set boundaries without guilt." The words hit her like a wave. She had always believed kindness meant saying yes, no matter the cost. But now, she understood that true kindness started with valuing yourself enough to say no. By December, snow blanketed the streets of Boulder, and Alyssa's apartment glowed with holiday lights. She hosted a small gathering: Sarah, a few coworkers, and Melanie, Amanda's cousin-in-law, who had reached out months earlier. Melanie brought homemade cookies and shyly thanked Alyssa again for inspiring her to stand up for herself. "You changed my life," Melanie said quietly, her voice trembling. "I never thought I could say no to my mom, but because of you, I did." Alyssa smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about her journey anymore. Her story had become a ripple, touching lives she hadn't even known existed. That night, as she watched the snow fall outside her window, Alyssa opened her journal and wrote one final entry for the year: "I used to think love meant holding on tightly. Now I know sometimes love means letting go, not just of others, but of the person I used to be. And in that letting go, I found myself." One crisp autumn morning, as Alyssa watered the small potted plants on her balcony, her phone pinged with a new email notification. She didn't rush to check it. Life in Boulder had taught her patience, but something about the sender's name caught her eye: Melanie Carter. It took her a moment to place it. Melanie was Amanda's cousin-in-law, someone she barely remembered from family gatherings, a quiet girl who always stayed in the background, never speaking up. Curious, Alyssa opened the email. The subject line read simply: "Thank you, Alyssa. Dear Alyssa, you probably don't remember me. I'm Melanie, Aunt Grace's daughter. Amanda once asked me to babysit Haley one summer, and you drove me home after the birthday party. I've been meaning to write this for months now. I stayed silent for years, thinking I didn't have the right to speak up. My family always said I was luckier than them because I lived alone, so I had to give more: money, time, energy. I worked 3 jobs at once and still had to send money home for my mom and brother. When I tried to say no, they called me selfish and ungrateful. But then I heard what you did, how you stood your ground, how you drew a line. It felt like someone lit a path I didn't know existed. You helped me realize that saying no isn't cruel, it's self-preservation. It's preserving the most precious thing, yourself. Thank you for showing me that." Melanie. Alyssa sat frozen, staring at the screen. Every word Melanie wrote felt like a drop falling into the still pond inside her. She had known, deep down, that her actions might ripple outward, but she hadn't expected them to reach someone like Melanie, someone quiet, someone hiding in plain sight, just as she once had. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed a reply: "Dear Melanie, thank you for having the courage to share this with me. I know it's not easy, but please remember, you're not alone. You're not selfish. You're just learning to love yourself the right way, and there's nothing wrong with that." Alyssa, as she hit send, something crystallized within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. Her journey, her pain, her fight, it wasn't isolated. It was part of something bigger, a chain reaction of courage spreading quietly through lives she'd never even touched directly. Later that afternoon, Alyssa decided to take a walk along the cobblestone paths near her apartment. The maple trees were ablaze with fiery reds and golds, their leaves tumbling gently to the ground in the soft breeze. She wrapped a scarf around her neck and stepped outside, feeling the cool air brush against her cheeks. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying guilt or regret. She walked slowly, savoring the crunch of leaves beneath her boots. A little girl rode her bike ahead, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes. Her mother ran behind her, calling, "Slow down, sweetheart." Alyssa paused, watching them. There was something profoundly simple yet beautiful about the scene, a reminder of what life could be when you stopped trying to prove your worth to others. That night, Alyssa sat by her desk, penning an entry in her journal. "For years, I thought love meant holding on tightly. I thought being strong meant sacrificing everything for others. But now I know, that's not love. Love is setting boundaries. Strength is choosing yourself. Sometimes, letting go isn't losing. It's finding. And today, I feel found." She closed the journal and placed it alongside other meaningful objects on her desk: a smooth stone from her first hike in Colorado, a jar of dried flowers, and the bright red dress she'd bought to celebrate her independence. Each item told a story, a fragment of the person she had become. The next morning, sunlight poured through her windows, casting golden light across the room. Alyssa brewed a cup of coffee and stepped onto her balcony. Below, the streets buzzed with life, but she felt a profound sense of peace. She realized something simple yet profound: walking away from toxic relationships wasn't a loss, it was the first step toward reclaiming her true self. She wasn't the same Alyssa who lived to please others, who stayed silent for fear of upsetting anyone. She was Alyssa, the woman who knew how to say enough, who valued herself, and who understood that kindness didn't mean erasing her own limits. As she sipped her coffee, she thought about Melanie, Kelly, and all the people whose lives had intersected with hers. She didn't need her family to understand her choices. She didn't need their approval. What mattered was that she finally understood herself. And that understanding was enough.